Sylvia Goldberg faces off against the skilled opponent Metius in a high-speed battle. She realizes that Metius is an exceptional opponent, unlike any she has faced before. Sylvia has been searching for a rival who can push her to her limits, and Metius seems to fit the bill perfectly. However, Curse Prison, the character Sylvia is playing as, is at a disadvantage due to a lack of maneuverability. Sylvia considers her options, realizing she must make adjustments to win. She decides to use Curse Prison's ultimate technique, which requires quick thinking and acting. Suddenly, Curse Prison disappears, and Sylvia realizes something big is about to happen. She frantically searches for her opponent, only to look up and see a massive weapon falling from the sky. Curse Prison appears, ecstatic about the arrival of the weapon, while Sylvia is left in shock and disbelief. Cursed Prison's jump onto the news helicopter causes an explosive crash. His ability to incorporate inorganic matter into himself means the wall of flames may be a cover for his next move. Sylvia knows she's outmatched and must push beyond her limits. Cursed Prison utilizes the news helicopter's powerful weapons and his own multiple swords to attack. Metius seems to have the upper hand until Sylvia uses the flowing EI fist jutsu to break free and defend herself. Though it's a close call, Sylvia aims to turn the tide of battle. Amidst the sword spinning and an exchange of attacks, Metius unleashes his ultimate move, the Meteor Strike. Cursed Prison must make a crucial decision between activating their own ultimate move or attempting to evade Metius's attack. Calculating each move with precision, Cursed Prison launches their own ultimate move, resulting in a massive explosion that shakes the battlefield. In the aftermath, Cursed Prison reflects on their actions and resolves to protect innocent bystanders from being harmed in their battles. The protagonist watches as a mother and daughter flee, aided by his intervention. His strength pales in comparison to that of his opponent, Cursed Prison, but he remains composed, even as he loses his weapons. Cursed Prison's ultimate move is unique, tied to his characterization as the result of Galaxius's irregularity, an enemy of Metius. The protagonist, therefore, must use his ultimate move, Prison Break, to achieve victory. Prison Break allows him to draw on surrounding inorganic matter to augment his physical abilities, giving him a short window of equal power to his foe. And with this newfound strength, the protagonist is determined to win, propelled by his belief in his ability as a hero. In the midst of a high-stakes battle, the protagonist, wearing a heavy full-body armor, feels a surge of adrenaline as she finally gains an advantage over her opponent. Despite her rival's attempts to guard against her attacks, the protagonist refuses to back down and unleashes a flurry of punches. She manages to land a critical hit and appears to be on the verge of victory. However, her opponent unexpectedly breaks free and delivers a devastating blow, resulting in a double KO. As the protagonist's vision fades to black, she wonders if amateurs can ever hope to defeat pro gamers. The outcome of the battle remains uncertain, leaving readers on the edge of their seats. Sanraku is disappointed to hear that he will be forcefully logged out and won't be able to participate in the fourth round. Drinking an energy drink given to him by Katsu, he questions whether it will be enough to refuel him. Sylvia Goldberg is known for her resilience and stamina, making her a formidable opponent. Katsu is already assuming that Sanraku will lose in the extra round, but Sanraku is determined to win, despite feeling angry and frustrated. The gauges will accumulate twice as fast, and there will be new NPCs on the map. It's shopping time, and Sanraku wonders about the tank that looks solid. The protagonist had to make some sacrifices in order to survive the Cursed Prison, extra custom. He traded his mobility for armor and armaments, including rocket launchers and missiles. Despite looking poor and miserable compared to his companion, he was ready for any problem-solving situation. However, the physical ratio between them did not bode well for victory. Trying to remain hidden, the protagonist was surprised by a woman carrying hot coffee. But his reflexes saved him from being burned, and he quickly retaliated with a surprise attack. As a seasoned gamer, he knew he could exploit the game's quirks to his advantage, such as discovering a technique that proved fall damage was not equal to 0 for others in his grasp. He used this new technique in a super extra ultimate move, slamming Metius into the ground with an impact conversion. Even though Metius was initially unable to move, he eventually recovered. With only 10% of his HP remaining, the protagonist faced the imminent destruction of a falling meteor. Sylvia Goldberg, his opponent, had launched an attack so powerful that he had to resort to a risky move. He retreated to the 12th floor, leaving just 2 floors to go until safety. But as Sylvia questioned him, he struggled to find the right words. Suddenly, the hero spoke up, counting down to the meteor's impact. In a desperate move, the protagonist activated his special equipment and launched an all-out attack. The explosion left the outcome uncertain. The group debates over what type of food to eat, with each member advocating for their own preference. Sylvia congratulates the protagonist on his gaming skills, but he struggles with the language barrier. Katsu teases Sylvia about her cat ears, and she reveals that it was just a forced hobby. But the conversation takes a serious turn as Sylvia challenges the protagonist to a game of Galaxia with the promise of revealing the identities of her villainous colleagues if she loses. As the game commences, the group analyzes the different character types and the strategies that come with each. The protagonist faces off against Silver Jumper, a seeker type who relies on cunning and traps rather than direct combat. The times have changed and sheer power is no longer enough. Metius dashes through the air, his attacks avoidable. Silver Jumper's jumping abilities surpass even Cursed Prison's ultimate move stage, allowing him to move through the air swiftly. Securing the Chaos Cube is another way to victory besides defeating opponents. In order to get the cube, the hero must defeat NPC villains. Natsume Megumi was likely aiming for victory via securing the Chaos Cube. Sylvia-chan and her teammates were battle maniacs, so getting the cube never crossed their minds. Sylvia-chan tackles Silver Jumper, and the two roll onto the ground. Metius stands up, and a portion of the nearby building's wall falls between him and Silver Jumper. This is no longer a well-kept and maintained coliseum. What will Sylvia do as the hero? Sylvia Goldberg faces a difficult decision, as Katsu presents her with a choice between securing the Chaos Cube or defeating Metius. However, Katsu's true intentions are unknown, and the hunt for NPC villains only adds to the dilemma. Sylvia's exceptional problem-solving skills are put to the test as she tries to outmaneuver Katsu and Metius. The game becomes even more complex as Kei joins the fray and employs a strategic technique that Sylvia is unfamiliar with. Despite all the challenges, Kei emerges as the victor, much to the delight of the spectators of the global game competition. Katsu won 1 round, but there's more to come. Their strategy is a trick, throwing players off the main road into a dark, barren off-road. It's meant to be ridiculous, but it's not easy to subdue mob aggro. However, Katsu and Sylvia may pair up as a team. Metius has mobility restrictions, but Sylvia uses sidestepping and bending for better results. Sylvia's emotions are at their peak, but she's running on fumes. This is Katsu's chance, and they're not relying on cheap tricks anymore. Plus, they have caffeine, but using too many energy drinks can cause damage. Winning against Sylvia is a 1 in 1,000 chance, but Kei won't give up. In the 3rd round of Galaxia Heroes, Chaos, both Metius and Sylvia were prepared to unleash their ultimate moves. Metius had the powerful Meteor Strike, but Sylvia had a unique jump kick that increased the range and duration of her attack. Katsu had a rough idea of where the Chaos Cube might be, but both players were locked in a staring match, waiting for the other to make a move. Uomi Kei made the first move, charging straight at Metius, while Sylvia watched from the sidelines. Kei had been studying Sylvia's battle style and had found a way to counter her moves. The battle was chaotic and intense, but Kei was able to secure the victory and move on to the next round. Along the way, he encountered a familiar NPC in trouble and was able to help, adding to the randomness and excitement of the game. Silver Jumper had collected several keys to victory, and he knew there was no other place or chance like this. He used a leg hook technique to take advantage of Sylvia Goldberg's smallest of gaps in defense, caused by exhaustion and tension. His ultimate move. Silverfoot enhanced his kicking power and allowed him to run faster. He saved an NPC woman from the villains, pretending to carry her to safety while actually getting closer to Chaos Tower. The stage was set for the final battle between heroes and villains, and Silver Jumper was smiling confidently, ready for the ultimate showdown. After the second day of GGC, some were satisfied while others were not. Uomike's team was invited to an after-party, but the next day, Uomike was too tired to even open her SNS app. She wonders if she'll ever sleep well again. Thinking about games, Uomike considers researching good games and their reviews, but is interrupted by Sanraku-kun. Later, news spread that Sylvia Goldberg's unbeaten streak was broken by Silver Jumper, and Uomike couldn't help but laugh. Despite their unrepresentative playstyle, Uomike and Pencilton hide their identities for fear of being scouted by a crazy manager. The protagonist and her party arrive at a cosplay event, feeling out of place as the sole cosplayers. However, our heroine boasts of being ahead of her time, leading to a humorous exchange with her friends. The party is escorted by a bodyguard, causing our protagonist to contemplate fleeing. They are also worried about violating the dress code and being embarrassed. The guests glare at them as they enter the venue, making our heroine feel uncomfortable. They encounter some pro gamers who appear friendly but have unfriendly faces. Our protagonist wants to eat meat to heal her mental state and sees Natsume-san watching something uptight. It turns out that Katsu and Sylvia Goldberg are conversing and attracting attention. The protagonist and her friend conspire to interfere, leading to the horror of being given many business cards by pro gamers. Nitro Squad's renown will surge after their exhibition match, and they hope to avoid unreasonable sponsor offers in the future. Megu congratulates Kei, and they discuss their goal to graduate college. Sanraku's family all have their own hobbies and are understanding of each other's interests. However, there was a condition that limited Sanraku's passion. Although professional gaming was a viable career with high earning potential, education may have been a reason why Sanraku turned down such opportunities. Kei envied Sanraku's attitude that success is achievable through perseverance. The defeat of Sylvia Goldberg and the emergence of mysterious players would soon bring about significant change. Several days have passed since the exhibition match. The protagonist focuses on defeating Kutanid of the Abyss and decides to train using the virtual weightlessness feature of their VR device. However, the difference in specs between their new VR chair and the headgear they used before becomes problematic. The protagonist learns about the specific immunities of the tower bosses from scouting raids and wonders if their group has a strong enough magic caster to defeat the physical resistant boss. They decide to log in and start the party, hoping to meet Rei-san again. The protagonist wakes up in Realease and realizes their brain is working at full throttle. Emil greets the protagonist, noting how often they sleep. Sanraku starts feeling a strange sensation from Emil touching his head. He decides to exercise and figure out the cause of the feeling, but can't. He asks about Alva and finds out he's searching for a lost sword. Sanraku decides to help him later. Rust and Mold are having fun doing research about the game, with Rust experimenting on mobs. Sanraku randomly chooses a direction to search for Alva's sword and hears fish people's voices. Emil's ears guide the group towards Alva, and they manage to avoid the mermaids. Upon finding Alva, they engage in combat with a chimera. The monster is a mishmash of various creatures, including crustacean and tentacle-like limbs, a gel-like body, and a coral for a head. It has also swallowed Alva's sword, and has a strange appendage hanging between its thighs. Despite the grotesque situation, the group charges forward to defeat the chimera and retrieve the sword. The seafood chimera, though a threat, should not be too durable. Sanraku attacks and discovers that the marlin sword is particularly deadly. Their attacks must be strategic and targeted. Meanwhile, they face tentacle attacks and the possibility of poison. They notice the Chimera's abilities and enhanced reflexes, making for a more difficult battle. They work as a team, each taking turns as bait and attacking the monster, until Emul finally lands the finishing blow with his magic edge spell. Sanraku's team celebrates their victory and introduces themselves, but are surprised by the appearance of a spirit from Alva's weapon. Spirits are common in video games and come in many forms, ranging from fire and water to mythological creatures like the Jinn and Excalibur. However, each game may have different details, and creators sometimes change the facts to suit their setting better. In the world of Shangri-La Fronteir, spirits are like natural disasters with free will and their own unique parameters. They have a ticking clock, and once their magic is used up, they cease to exist. Spirits have a small ego and are barely capable of distinguishing themselves from their surroundings, which explains why they usually disappear without a trace. However, the more famous and grand the name of the spirit, the greater its power and scale of catastrophe it can cause. Despite their ability to absorb magic and wield it more potently than humans, spirits are mostly insignificant to players unless they appear during unique scenarios. Igaz's Dentsu is a powerful spirit, and all spirits that fail to become strong will fade as a result. This sword contains a spirit that was about to disappear because of its inability to adapt. The spirit initially appeared as a bluish water-like appearance before taking on a human form and consenting to becoming a weapon for Alva. The protagonist meets a player who had been searching for them. They discuss the acquisition of a powerful sword that contains a spirit. The protagonist jokingly suggests that weapons with multiple spirits might become weapons of mass destruction. They then recount their recent encounter with a monstrous chimera. The group prepares to fight a boss, but the protagonist ponders doing some recon before the battle. They decide to leave their teammate Emul behind to guard their base, as they would only serve as a meat shield in the battle. The protagonist decides to make an additional dish to go with their ochazuke and creates a simple fried rice dish with leftover rice, broth, and some miscellaneous ingredients. They name it chicken rice. The protagonist reports their successful defeat of the magic-absorbing boss, Cleone, but notices something fishy about its setting. It doesn't have the same rotten smell as the other monsters. They also speculate about the remaining two bosses and their weaknesses, considering Mold's testimony about effective hits. As they ponder, a mermaid interrupts with its song, but the protagonist manages to dislocate its jaw with a high kick. They continue to brainstorm about the mysteries of the underwater city and its rulers. The protagonist, armed with his trusty Dullahan sword, easily dodges the mermaid's attack and delivers a fatal blow. This victory prompts thoughts about weapons and tactics, with a realization about the advantages and disadvantages of long and short-range weapons. In a strategy meeting, the team discusses the remaining bosses and the possibility of invulnerability depending on distance. They plan their attack, hoping to defeat the smaller bosses to gain access to Kutanid. The protagonist uses this time to earn money and items, with the convenience of inventory's unlimited storage space. Today, the protagonist embarked on an exciting seafood tour, hunting for fresh ingredients from aquatic enemies. They encountered a rare seafood emperor and reflected on the surprising drops from defeated foes. The protagonist worked relentlessly to amass cash and items, even comparing defeated enemies to human haircuts and reveling in the thrill of battles. They faced a formidable enslaving carrier angler and its accompanying swarm, determined to win valuable loot. With their companions resting, the protagonist prepared for the upcoming boss battle. The team discusses their strategy for the upcoming boss fight, with Sanraku in charge of attacking and aggro management, Rust providing range support, and Mold acting as support. They nickname their operation Shell Digging and head into the tower to face the boss, a giant snail with a spiral rapier and cutlass. Sanraku confidently takes charge, brushing off concerns about the boss's defensive powers. They enter the battle position ready to start the hunt. In this game world, Even rapiers can be deadly weapons, despite their historical reputation for being useless in battle. Their slim shape allows for quick piercing attacks that are harder to block than wider slashes. But our protagonist, with his knowledge of enemy tactics and clever weapon switches, manages to take down a formidable foe. His team also utilizes different elemental arrows to test which is most effective against their enemy. Though the boss may have flashy movements, the real challenge is in its battle style. With wit and skill, our hero takes on his opponents in an intense battle. The Snail Knight's weapon choice raises suspicions for the protagonist. The cutlass proves to be ineffective against them and is commonly associated with pirates. The drop item, a red whale cutlass, reveals a connection to a unique Scenario X quest. The group realizes they are simultaneously involved in two quests, one involving the Kutanid of the Abyss and the other, punching the Apostle of the Abyss. The latter seems to have multiple endings and must be completed by the protagonist who initiated the quest. As they continue their journey, they await the arrival of another member, Ray. Meanwhile, a fight between sisters, sparked by a missing item, leads to ominous consequences elsewhere. The group originally planned to defeat the Barnacle, but a sudden item changed their plans. They found a new safe house for Emil, Alva, and Strauder, and were suddenly surrounded by a large group of fish people. To divert their attention, one member sacrificed themselves while the others escaped. The main character encountered a familiar face who they knew they had to defeat. After respawning, they were surprised to be wearing a salmon head and could not help but laugh at their ridiculous appearance. The group tried to convince Emil to wear the salmon head, but they refused. Despite the absurdity of the situation, the salmon head's effect was that it smelled fishy and yet provided perfect vision while worn. The protagonist questions the mechanics of the game, but decides it's best not to think too much about it. They discover a new ability to bend their limbs in unnatural directions and plan to incorporate it into their fighting style. They scare their companion Stroud with an impressive zombie imitation and worry they may have caused him harm. The protagonist realizes the salmon head helmet has better defense than their usual bird head mask, but receives criticism from their group for scaring Strauder. They reveal the cutlass to Strauder, which contains a clue about his missing father. Despite his intense emotions, the protagonist takes it upon himself to handle the conversation with the NPC and look for a solution to the quest. The NPC is skilled in the use of the cutlass. The AI of NPCs has been constantly evolving, with Shanfro's NPCs able to answer complex questions and even express emotions. However, their knowledge is limited to what is programmed into their code. The protagonist lies to a scared NPC in order to motivate him to take up his father's quest. Pioneers like them lounge into the darkness with nothing but torches, and those who follow can walk down the bright, illuminated path. Rust and Mold confirm their willingness to help. Our protagonist and their party have no choice but to fight their way out. They welcome a new member, though he is not thrilled with his nickname. The plan is to take on the master of the area in 2 days, but they still need to take down other bosses and gather items. They stumble across a shipyard full of treasure and decide to collect whatever they can. The protagonists ask Rust and Mold to join their guild to share access to mechas, which they need to defeat enemies. In the midst of a battle, they hear something approaching and decide to leave the mechas behind and grab whatever treasure they can. Finally, they welcome Akitsu Akan into their guild. The party consists of Sanraku, Rust, Mold, Emul, Alva, Akitsu, Akane, Sickle, and Nereis, with a good composition even without Ray and Strauder. The avant-garde has 7 people, 2 heavy hitters, and 2 squishy mages. Physical fighters are Sanraku, Alva, and Sickle, with a magically extending stick. Rust can use both physical and magical attacks with ease, while Akitsu Akane mainly uses magic. They must defeat the Barnacle boss to proceed smoothly and deal with remaining bosses. They are concerned about Ray, who hasn't logged in. The game's mechanic of time advancing even when not logged in is frustrating for Sanraku. The group arrives at the tower where the barnacle is located. The boss is bizarre with barnacles all over its body, but its ability to disable short-range attacks is a mystery. The party observes the boss, covered in barnacles, though Sanraku questions whether they could even be classified as seafood. When he suggests eating them, his party members look at him skeptically. Nonetheless, they initiate their attack and discover that the boss has a close-range protection mechanism. While Alva's attack manages to breach the barrier, the boss retaliates. The party devises a plan to estimate the effective attack range and assigns Emul and Akitsu Akane to the task. As they face the boss, Sickle and Alva work together to take it down. The evasion tank job is all about evading damage to protect the party. It requires good reflexes and movement, but one hit could mean game over. The protagonist finds the ninja class initially appealing due to its natural traits, but later discovers their own skills work well as an evasion tank. Fishing is also a notable feature in the game, with the fisherman class able to catch all kinds of fish, even with basic equipment. The barnacle enemy is powerful, able to use kinetic energy to attack, but has a weakness in that it can't immediately stop. The party easily defeats the boss, but the loot split among them is not impressive. The protagonist wonders what will happen when they defeat the final boss. Suddenly, Arctus Regalex attacks, but the protagonist executes a Hollywood jump to dodge it and outsmart it. The group noticed the enemy wasn't friendly and prepared to fight, but suddenly, Saiga Zero appeared and crushed the beast's head with a giant sledgehammer. Ray also arrived, apologizing for being absent due to urgent real-life matters. They decided to challenge the fourth boss to avoid being evacuated from the underwater city and cleared the path for Kutanid. The battle was tough due to the physical attacks doing hardly any damage and the boss's brute power. They used various methods of spellcasting and techniques like complete memorization. The Oni armor unleashes a fiery beast from her hand and injures the boss, while Emul and Rust add their own attacks. The combination is too much for the boss to handle, resulting in victory. The party's skill of maximum firepower proves to be the absolute power they need to clear bosses faster than others. All four Sea Kings are defeated. Despite their best efforts, the team had been forced to disband due to the limitations imposed by Kutanid in the underwater city. The final battle would take place in the Blue Palace in the city center on the last promised day, with the goal to defeat the giant octopus boss. In the meantime, the protagonist found solace in playing survival games and hunting monsters to prepare for the upcoming battle. Though there were no magical abilities in the game, the monsters posed real threats, and each encounter helped the protagonist hone their instincts as a predator. Despite the absence of family members, the protagonist remained focused on their mission and continued to prepare for the final battle. A courier arrives with a large package for Hizutome Rakuro. He speculates what it could be, fearing it may be his mother's obsession with insects. When he learns it's a chair-type full-dive VR System Pro from Cyber Battalion, he contacts a friend to ask about it. They explain it's a gift from the GGC team, and after verifying the package, he excitedly opens it. Inside is the impressive VR system and unique illustrations. Rakuro is pleased, but feels like he made a deal with the devil. Despite this, he acknowledges its usefulness in the upcoming fight against Kutanid. With the announcement of the sequel, intense curiosity drew an influx of new players to the game. Despite the usually competitive environment, the entrance was much tamer. The protagonist receives a bribe and decides to test it out with Nephilim Hollow, a game he wants to use to test something with Rust and Mold. He names his new machine Colossus Lilac and sets out to seek revenge for his previous defeat. With its maneuverability and 14 propulsion boosters, the protagonist claims invincibility. He impresses himself and defeats Rust, but when attempting full 3D maneuverability, he crashes into a building. Despite Rust's plea for a break, the protagonist demands another duel. The protagonist's crazy maneuvering takes a toll on his game character's body, but it's the optimal build. Trying more complicated builds leads to compromises. His friends are surprised by his moves, and he reveals that he upgraded his VR system, giving him an advantage. They discuss a new game that uses Shanfro technology. The protagonist thinks about his journey to this point and decides to focus on their upcoming battle. His friend Rust is determined to ride the mechas in the sequel to Nephilim Hollow. They joke around, but something feels off to the protagonist. The saying, "Time and tide, wait for no man," reminds the reader to always use light magic and dark magic as soon as they can, since they're incredibly powerful. Fire magic is also an option, albeit less effective in the long run. The protagonist expects a night-long battle with the enemy, giving everyone ample time to fight without interruption. Suddenly, the protagonist receives a mysterious package containing a prototype energy drink called Riot Blood Revolving Lantern. Though the drink seems ominous, the protagonist decides to try it out. Some strange symbols start appearing on the edges of their field of view, possibly due to the drink. The protagonist sets off to meet the Kutanid extermination squad at the underwater palace. Despite feeling anxious, the protagonist decides to consume Riot Blood undead to gain an advantage against Kutanid. However, they are disappointed by its toothpaste-like taste. As they wait for their team to gather, they discuss and choose a team name and strategy. They settle on mortals and stargazing respectively and set out to defeat Kutanid. The diverse group unites with determination to emerge victorious. Players of this game must go around maps, killing enemies to level up. However, there is an unknown element that requires careful consideration, such as navigating a worn-out suspension bridge. In the unique scenario, X called Gazing at the Abyss and the World Turns Around, a team of players enters a blue castle and splits up to search for the monster Kutanid. They find clues, but come face to face with the monster right away, causing some frustration. Regardless, they press forward, hoping for a save point before a potential game over. The protagonist faces a strange, Kutanid-resembling creature. It's an oversized octopus and doesn't seem threatening despite 4 of its tentacles being shackled to the ground. The protagonist urges a tactical retreat, sensing danger. However, some NPCs believe they can defeat the unique monster, but the protagonist reminds them of its ability to reverse even reality. The protagonist contemplates the dangers of VR technology and its impact on human perception. They approach the topic philosophically, realizing that what people see and feel may not be true due to electric signals in the brain. Misunderstanding between the player and the opponent is common. Sanraku suggests charging at Kutanid, despite uncertainty of its form. Rust's blunt remark gets a thank you from the group. Regrets arise about not attacking the castle earlier. A considerable amount of consideration is needed to clear any unique scenario EX. Less than 10 hours remain to find, recognize, strategize, and defeat Kutanid. The Kutanid extermination squad holds an emergency meeting to analyze what they know about the unique monster, Kutanid of the Abyss. They discuss its abilities, including its power of inversion and potential weaknesses. Akitsu Akane suggests the bosses of the 4 towers weakened Kutanid, with 4 of the monster's tentacles currently chained to the ground. However, they still don't understand Kutanid's motive for setting up this trap. The team decides to change their approach and investigate the 4 sectors of the underwater city of Lulilas, which were added after the inversion took place. They conclude that defeating the bosses may not be enough to beat Kutanid, as they don't know its true form. The squad must remain cautious and figure out the why and how on their own, with no one to guide them by the hand. The team searched the shipwrecks and towers thoroughly, but found nothing related to their quest. Though they did find plenty of treasure, it wasn't enough. The castle was vast, and each room looked the same, making the search difficult. The mortals split up into 2 teams, with Colonel Sanraku leading Team A and looking for a diary as a possible clue. As they searched, Sanraku pondered the relationship between Kutanid and Lulilas, believing it was the key to solving the mystery. He wondered why Kutanid left the city half desolated, and speculated it may have been due to some sort of contract. Despite their efforts, they still had much to uncover in the castle. The people of Realease made a contract with Kutanid, but what would they get in return? To find out, they had to explore the castle and find some written records. Luckily, Team A found a diary, revealing the horror that had befallen the city. The blue had invaded, turning everything in its path blue and causing despair among the people. The castle offered refuge, but the lack of food and water led to starvation and dehydration. As a storm raged outside, the diary writer pondered the futility of trying to wash away the blue, which seemed to have taken root deep within the city's foundations. It was a grim situation, one that could lead to infighting and further tragedy. But there was still hope, even if it was faint, that someday they could overcome this terrible crisis. A creature emerged from the sea, swallowing the blue that threatened the city. It was described as an 8-headed dragon, but was it really Kutanid, the octopus? The people hailed it as their savior, but soon realized its dark intentions. Kutanid demanded their land in exchange for their salvation, stating that the island was no longer suitable for human life due to the blue contamination. The ruler of Realease left a diary behind, detailing the island's past and the symbolism of the throne that may hold the key to defeating Kutanid. The search for clues continued until fatigue set in and the group took a break. They still had time before facing Kutanid for the ultimate battle.